In this time of the pandemic and in the era of fake news, good journalism's main role should be to inform and to educate. And as one media academic, Professor Chris Frost, chair of the National Union of Journalists Ethics Council in the United Kingdom, says it has taken this horrific pandemic to jolt journalists back to the reality. What is the reality? Well, we're charged with presenting the truth and holding government to account on behalf of the public. So how is South African media doing in this regard so far? We're over 100 days into the lockdown. Pippa Green is with us, who is the press ombudsman. Pippa, good afternoon to you. The world over, far too many media organizations, I think, have gone along with misrepresentations, falsifications, perhaps even encouraged them. How do newsrooms guard against this, and how should audiences be filtering it?
Good afternoon, Jeremy. Thank you for having me. I'm in Cape Town and the wind is very hectic here, so sometimes I can't hear you that well, but I think I did. I think that the one thing that it's drawn attention to, this pandemic, is the need to have proper science reporting. So there's been some catch-up that's been done around the world, and I think here in particular. Generally, I think that our media has been pretty good, the way that they have reported on the science and reported on the extent and breadth of the pandemic, the using of the numbers, sort of the bar chart of the numbers every day, as some of the media organizations do, such as News 24, has been really helpful. I think that worldwide, though, as probably here, there's a lot of difference, because the problem with the pandemic is it's very politicized. So, for instance, in the United States, those media outlets that support Donald Trump are given to downplaying it and given to questioning some of the science, whereas those who don't have concentrated on really sort of how the virus is spread, what it means, and what some of the interventions are that can be taken. So I do think it's a political thing as well, and I think that what behoves the media at the moment is to focus on the science and the reality.
The other issue, Pippa Green, in any time of national emergency, I would suggest to you that journalists can find themselves conflicted. They may no longer think it's appropriate to attack the government or to attack the opposition over views, but instead take the standpoint that everyone is in this together, that we should all be collegial about it. But that's not our job, is it?
No, I agree with you. I think that there were times at the beginning of the pandemic, in the first lockdown, where I heard and saw a few things on broadcast media, in particular, where there was that feeling. I don't think it's our job to police the public, and I don't think it's our job to not criticize the government. I think that if the regulations don't make sense or don't make sense to certain sectors of society, our job is to reflect that. I think that when food parcels are stolen, our job is to reflect that. Or, when high-profile people get infected, our job is also to reflect that. So it's not about being unsupportive, but it's about maintaining a role of being sort of critical and trenchant in how we cover government. So there's a difference really in how we cover the virus and the science of it, and how we cover government and its reaction to the virus. And all governments, I can't think of any exceptions at the moment, none of them are immune to that kind of criticism around the world. So that is our job, and we should make sure that we do it properly by having the right tools.
Pippa, are members of the public complaining about the way in which the media is handling this? That is your remit.
We have had a few complaints. I haven't dealt with them myself, because in the press council system, they go first to the public advocate, and then if he can't resolve them, they come to me. But some of the complaints have been a challenge of the science. So to say, for instance, that the that a lockdown is really counterproductive, that it does more harm to the economy, and the media is not reflecting that enough, and citing the case of Sweden, which didn't have a lockdown. But interestingly, the New York Times recently carried an article about Sweden saying, in fact, the number of infections are much the same as anywhere, or higher than the surrounding European countries, and the effects on the economy are much the same. So they kind of got into a lose-lose situation there. So we've had that. We've also had a couple of complaints about naming local newspapers, community newspapers or local newspapers, naming people who've been infected with the virus. Sometimes they've got the names, the media, from semi-public platforms. This is always an ethical challenge for journalists, because Facebook and Twitter particularly, but in some respects Facebook too, is a public platform. So one has to take account of that. And we issued guidelines early on in response to a request from one of the media organizations about under what circumstances one can name people and who've been infected, and whether, in fact, this media organization was arguing that we should start naming people, because it will then take away the stigma that there was, for instance, in the early days of the HIV/AIDS epidemic, that was attached to people getting that. And I think that I think the answer is a nuanced one. The question is complex and the answer is a nuanced one. I'm happy to tell you what we said, but it's not an easy yes or no answer.
Pippa Green, we are going to leave it there, unfortunately, but it's an issue that we will circle back to. Press Ombudsman Pippa Green, thank you.